sondosa ngizokuthanda kuseni ngithande busuku ngithande nasemini funa wena wedwa love you just be my girl be my girl be my girl just be my girl sondela kimi wena sondosa ngizokuthanda kuseni ngithande busuku ngithande nasemini.
Hello, everyone, and we are back again with yet another insightful and exciting episode from our YLC digital program for 2021. Now, as we are celebrating Youth Month this month, we thought it would be important to cover the importance of celebrating Youth Month and the role that the youth play in our broader society. We'll also be looking at stress management and time management. And like any other of our episodes, we have a special guest today, and we'll let him introduce himself.
Yes, hi. I'm Edwin Smith, and I work at the University of Pretoria on the Mamelodi campus.
Right? What is the importance of celebrating Youth Day, or rather Youth Month, or commemorating Youth Month?
As conventions have it, Youth Day is a seminal moment, I think, historically speaking, in terms of the anti-apartheid struggle in South African history. June 16 stands out as a historic moment that shifted the balance of forces in the struggle against apartheid, and in this instance led by young people, primarily responding to the imposition of Afrikaans as a language of instruction in the schools, but more broadly actually challenging the apartheid dispensation and its authority and rule over young people. So as a historic marker, it's a watershed moment in South African history. And it becomes particularly important because it acknowledges the contribution and difference young people make and made in revitalizing and reinvigorating the struggle against apartheid. And, from 76 onwards, the struggle just snowballed all the way through the 80s and eventually led to the big changes that happened in 1990 that led to the 1994 democratic dispensation. And so it is acknowledging that seminal contribution. But at the same time, the way commemorations work is that it also helps them to remind new generations about the contribution and sacrifices made by generations before them, with a view to, again, inspiring and in reinvigorating them to also pick up issues that have concern and interest to the youth and mobilize around those. So it's an important historic marker, it's an important moment in our history and our process of becoming a free democratic society. So that's what's important about it in the main for me.
And with regards to education, I myself being a young graduate coming out of varsity, I realized that education can be an instrument of your own liberation as a person. How important is education towards young people, for them to be educated?
Well, it's critical actually, because young people are the future. And so, and education is a gateway to the network of skills and capabilities required to further develop the economy, further develop society, and also it's an important marker that enables young people to become productive members of the economic community and system in society. And it is very important that our youth pursue education relentlessly. It is not just on a personal level an enabler and liberator and a capacity builder, but on a societal level, it also impacts on the social good of education, in the sense that when you are able to create opportunity and contribute constructively to society, you then the ripple effect is you personally get rewarded for that, but then the consequences of your contribution affects others in the larger society. And in our instance, an educated young person who's able to get a job is able to take care of his family, both immediate and extended family, given our particular context and the communities we come from, and also be able then to make opportunities available for others. But far more important, I think this is one of the weaknesses that we have in our system, is that often our young people are trained and qualified and they go and look for work. And they are not trained and qualified to create work.
Oh, okay.
And that's the missing link in our training and our orientation. So one of the things that we have seen globally is that when young people are able to go out and become entrepreneurs and create new opportunities, find new gaps in the market, use their knowledge and understanding and skills to speak to the new evolving market and create opportunities, then they create more than just benefits to themselves immediately, but also benefits for others. And that's one of the things that I think is missing in the way we are doing things currently. And I think young people should agitate and demand that, because it's the only way in which we are going to be able to affect the kind of changes we want and deliver the kind of future that we all think we deserve. One that is fair, one that is opportunities for everybody, one that doesn't discriminate, one that doesn't privilege race, gender, or sex, or orientation, but one that admits one from the basis of what one is able to do. And without that, we will be doing more of the same and coming up with the very same kind of outcomes we've had in the last 24 years, where there seems to have been no significant difference in the lives of young people. More than that for me is the fact that young people are dreamers. Young people are ambitious and they're idealistic. And the unfortunate situation that we have right now is I do not see young people organized as we were in the past during the struggle, organized in articulate, cohesive entities that agitate and speaks on behalf of young people and their aspirations and their needs, and then also engages with authorities, be that government or the private sector, to make available resources to promote an agenda that is youth-focused, that is empowering, and that speaks to the needs of the young people. I think that's another missing thing, and a lesson we can learn from what young people did in 76 is that even though that incident started at Isaac Morrison's school in Soweto, it very quickly spread across the country and just grew over time in an organized fashion and became a formidable force. And so what is lacking now and what is missing in my view is a formidable organization of young people that pulls together their energy, their enthusiasm, their ambition, their ideals and their dreams, and agitates and engages this democratic space we have to ensure that there is an agenda, a national agenda that's set up to address the concerns and interests of young people and to build the kind of capacities and abilities required for young people to enter the formal, economic market and developmental space and make a contribution. So young people need to pull that together. They need to organically to pull that together for themselves and claim their stake. Currently, there are a lot of things that are not happening the way they should be happening in the political space, and the political youth formations aren't leading the way in that regard. So it is now up to ambitious young people to pull themselves together, create new formations, and agitate on behalf of young people for a rightful stake in how the society develops and where it goes to.
I think what you've mentioned could not be more important at this moment that we are in the current state of the country. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Go together.
And what I've seen being a young person is when you see another person, be that as it may, they may be young, doesn't matter what their other demographic is, doesn't matter gender, sex, but when they're doing something that's positive and seeks to positively impact society, you can't help but feel inspired and want to join them as well.
You're absolutely right. I think a sense of community. The other problem with the way we do things, let's take education.
Okay.
Education is a private pursuit. It's a very individual pursuit. It's you, your course, and your test. And you are measured and rewarded and acknowledged for your individual achievement. That kind of character of our development disconnects. We become competitors. We are as good or as better as the next person. And we always want to be better than the next person. We need to pull from that backwards and begin to have a sense of community, a cohort, where you understand that your success is my success and my success is your success. And together, we're able to bring coherence and formidability into what we do. And that's what's lacking. The sense of community, the sense of cohort, the generational consciousness, which is articulated across time from history with the June 17, 1976 generation as an example. And so we are in dire need now for a new consciousness amongst young people and a sense of we are in this together, and together we will make this thing work for ourselves and for everybody else as a result. So yes, we need to rebuild that sense of community, refashion and shape it, and give it teeth and meaning, so that it's contradictory because, in Western society, which this is what we are, the individual is supreme, and the community and society is secondary. But you need to invert that, because actually for us, the reality is that we need each other to make things happen. We need to collaborate, cooperate, and work together in order to make this kind of formidable impact that we can have as a collective. So collective action becomes important. And collective action for development, for progress. Not collective action for destruction and backwardness, but for progress. Because what you're agitating for is opportunities for the young people to live meaningful and sustainable lives and to contribute to society. Around those, we can begin to pull together a very sort of formidable contingent of society and subset of society that can chart the way in cooperation with other sectors, but specifically addressing the needs of young people for the future.
Yes.
And that we should really be thinking
Pushing.
about more seriously. The economy is not growing. We've got huge corruption issues. State coffers and resources have been plundered. Young people need to have a dream of a future that they imagine for themselves, and then work towards attaining it, because there's nothing that becomes more problematic if you don't have a future you can imagine for yourself. Then you live for the moment. You become desperate. Then you live for now. So it's what you can get now, how you can get it now, whatever it costs, and there are no consequences, no thought for what happens tomorrow. But we need to change that, reframe that kind of approach, and begin to conceptualize and articulate the kind of future people want. The young people of 76 were responding to an immediate problem.
Yes.
But it wasn't just about the immediate problem, it was about the future. It was about a free society where they can be who they want to be. And that drove them to confront bullets, live ammunition with stones. It spurred them on to risk their lives in some dramatic ways and fundamental ways, but that's because they believed in a future and they were fighting and striving and making whatever sacrifices necessary to achieve that future. We don't have that. We don't have the conversation amongst young people now about what kind of future we're imagining. We know all the problems. We talk about all the problems, and those need to be addressed. But beyond that, then what?
Wow.
So you sort out the stuff, and then what? You replace this leadership with that leadership, and then what? You know, for what purpose? So we need to get back to the fundamentals of articulating the kind of future we anticipate, we wish for, a youth-centered future that then drives us all towards coming together, pulling our resources together, our efforts together, our skills and capacities together, and then work towards achieving it.
Right. I heard you mention that young people, they don't always participate in economic activities, which they should, by being by creating work instead of seeking work. Now, being that we're in a democratic South Africa, statistics say that young people don't always participate in political activities compared to other demographics like the older population. How do we then get young people to start being interested, participating in political activities, and so forth?
It's difficult because, you know, politics have become a dirty word. Our experience in the short space of time that we've had in the democratic dispensation, you know, politics have lost the allure it used to have as a transforming and a transformative platform. Today, we are bombarded with our leaders being corrupt or facilitating corruption. People who, at one point in their lives, were warriors for freedom, for the idea that everybody should have an opportunity to become themselves, are now people who we are charging now because all they've done is plunder state coffers for personal interest and for their families. So there's a dissonance there and a denuding of politics. But I think we need to change that conversation because we need to engage in that space. Walking away is not going to fix it. Not getting involved is not going to fix it.
That's true.
But we need to be able to have a coherent idea of what it is we're trying to achieve and what it is we're trying to work towards. But you cannot not be involved. That's primary, you know. So we need to encourage young people. They must understand, accept the fact that what is going to happen to this country is going to affect them directly. And so they have a stake in what happens and how things happen. And without getting involved, they will not affect those kinds of changes that they wish and make sure that there is a future for them. Let's take the debate about the crisis of the state-owned enterprises. And everybody's got an opinion about it, whether in support of the actions happening. South African Airways has now been sold to private investors. It's a state-owned. Once you lose a state-owned asset, a public-owned asset, and becomes privatized, it is almost impossible to get it back. And once it is privatized, you take it out of the hands of the people, out of the hands of government. How do you regain that? How do you get that back? It becomes more impossible. And young people should be worried about these things because we are losing our assets. And everybody's around and everybody's seeing it happening and nobody's speaking up against it, nobody's acting up against it. And then tomorrow, when we are denuded and there are no assets to talk about, we will be blaming the leaders, whereas we were there. You were there. It happened in your time. What did you do about it? So we need to take ownership of our reality and get involved. Not getting involved is not going to resolve the issues. You might get away with taking care of your own personal stuff and sorting things out, but socially, societally, we're not going to be able to get away with it because there will always be those. And you who are at university are a minority. You who are able to get to university are only a minority. The larger contingent of young people do not make it to university because of all sorts of historic and legacy issues, opportunities and resources, difficulties that they have. And somehow we need to understand that the responsibility we have towards them and be able to open opportunities that brings them into the mainstream, that brings them into the fold, so that they're able as well to secure life for themselves as people and be part of what's going on. So I would say that if anything, what June 16th and Youth Month should remind us is what is possible when young people get involved and how that can change the game altogether. You know, and so if we build on that legacy and use that to marshal and rally young people into organized formation that takes responsibility and that gets involved, we might see another sea change level kind of transformation that happens in what's going on in this country. So it's an opportunity for young people to say, hey, we did this before. Generations before us have done this. We can do this too. Let us do it.
Okay. Wow. So, looking at the fact that I personally am a volunteer for the Mamelodi initiative, and I've seen firsthand what the science and art of volunteerism can do for a young person who comes from a disadvantaged background and who might not have access to the educational resources that we provide to them beforehand. And what advice would you give to those young people who come from Mamelodi and who perhaps might not have had access to those educational resources, who are looking for hope, who are looking for a better future and taking charge of a better future?
What the Mamelodi Initiative does, which has always appealed to me, is that it has what's called in some circles an asset-based approach, not a deficit-based approach. Now, let me explain the difference. A deficit-based approach is one that recognizes what you don't have.
Okay.
That's a deficit. It's what you don't have, what you're missing, and then tries to fill those gaps. An asset-based approach is one that says, what do you have? And sees all the things you have and say, what can we do with that? Right? It's an important mind shift because it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your background is. For as long as you are living, breathing, and thinking, you can do. And so this thing of people saying, I come from a poor background, I don't have anything, therefore I can't do anything, is nonsense. And we shouldn't feed that mentality. That's disempowering people. It's telling them, if you don't have a BMW, you are worthless. If you don't have a brand label piece of clothing on, you are worthless. That's nonsense, right? And so what the Mamelodi Initiative does, it awakens young people to the potential, to the ambition, to the capacities. And then it builds on those and strengthens those. And that's what we need to do. We need to approach young people from a point of view that it doesn't matter where you come from, you have potential, you have ability. What can you do? Let's build on those things that you have and let's make them work.
Okay.
That's different from saying, you come here, I want to help you because you are nothing. You know, that is totally disempowering. And I think if we begin to recognize that everybody has potential, everybody has an ability, we need to understand that. And so let's use a reference that would make sense to Mamelodi Initiative, you cast your bucket where you are. You know, instead of hoping and wishing for an ideal place, an ideal time, an ideal moment where you can, actually let's work with where are you now, what can you do here and now, and how do you make it happen?
Now,
And that becomes a thing that acknowledges the person, the humanity of the person and the ability of the person, and leverages that. And that is incredible. And that's part of what's missing. We all do things to young people. You know, there's no end to programs in our society that does things to young people. Some that are good do things with young people, together with them as partners in the process. But most of the stuff we do, we want to help people. We want to help the poor. We want to help the disadvantaged. We want to help the homeless. We don't want to work with them. We don't want them to tell us what their needs are, what their abilities are, how they can contribute, how we can partner. We need to shift that.
what tips do you have, stress management tips that people can use?
You know, I mean, it's a difficult question for me because the whole concept of young people who have stress is a bit of a foreign concept for me. But okay, we live in this interconnected global world, you know, where people sort of begin to understand things that, you know, are issues that are out there. I think in the first instance, I mean, stress is an outcome of whatever plan you have or ambition you have and your ability to meet it, or your inability to meet it, your difficulty in challenge meeting it. And that becomes a stress because you aren't able to live up to or realize your own plans and ambitions. And so one of the things that one do, I mean, you talked about stress management, time management, those are actually very related. Because if you structure a reasonable program of activity to achieve something, and you try and cover all the potential steps you need to take, and you then follow through, that should enable you to avoid stress. So it's a planning thing. Okay. It's a way of doing things. It's your approach. I personally have difficulties with the notion that that we should have so much stress, you know, in young people. But I think the tools, the skills one need, and time management and planning becomes critical skills that enable you to mitigate against stress, because you're able to set your program up in a realistic way that enables you to realistically engage in a process to achieve a goal. And if your goal is set too high, too ambitious, you know, you are able then to look at it and say, am I able to achieve this in the space of time that I have available or not, and make the adjustments you need to make. Sometimes even breaking down the steps properly for yourself so they're achievable and realistic, you know, then you're able to manage it. And psychologists are very important because they're able to assist people develop practical interventions on how to deal with bottlenecks, with unintended consequences or pressures or shortcomings or blind spots, which we all have. You know, sometimes the best plan is not necessarily a workable plan, but you need to build in those components where you can make the adjustments, own it so that you're able to make the adjustments when you need to and how you need to, and don't just doggedly go ahead with something that's not going to work, you know, because it's just going to frustrate you and then create stress in you. So it's a planning thing. It's a process thing. It's an approach on how you make something work. And I think we also have to be reasonable with ourselves and realistic. You know, very often a young person expects that they have a university degree, so they must get a top-paying job and they must have a car and live in the suburbs. And then when they get their first job, they can't do any of those things. And then they become stressed and frustrated, feel they haven't achieved anything. But it's your expectations that are not realistic. It's your understanding how these things work that's not realistic. So you need to temper those and be a bit more grounded in how you approach things. And also to understand that it takes work to achieve anything.
Yes.
Nothing happens on its own. Nothing happens automatically. And so you need to build that into your planning, into your expectations, and live within your capability and your means and not outside of it. You can stretch yourself, of course, and you'll be surprised how much you can achieve by stretching your targets and stretching yourself. But on one end, be gentle with yourself, be true to yourself, be realistic with yourself in your plans and in your activities, and in that way you will mitigate stress on yourself. And, you know, get rest, eat well, be healthy. Those are also integral things that helps you mitigate against stress. Because then you are fit for purpose, as it were, both mentally and physically. And emotionally you're fit for purpose. So you need to align all of those things and bring them together, and that'll enable you to better manage your context and situation, and hopefully then also mitigate against stress being an issue in your life.
Okay.
You know, I mean, you know, if you have a test tomorrow at 9 o'clock and you're out hanging out with your friends the night before, you know, and you think, oh, I'll do 2 hours and I'll get over it, and then 2 hours aren't enough and the test is here, you're going to stress, right? I mean, we create this stuff ourselves sometimes, you know. There are things that are outside of your control, but the things that you have control over, control them and manage them. Those are your assets. You have charge and responsibility over those. Use those, you know. My way of avoiding stress is, if I have assignment due next week, I have it done and ready for submission this week. I shift the target for myself. Even though it's due next week, I shift my target and bring it up to myself. What that does, it gives me some extra time before it's due to even improve it. You know, sit back a bit, think a bit out of the box, go look at it again, tweak it here, tweak it there. I've got the time now. I've made time available to myself. So that's how I deal with my stuff, and that helps me, you know. And so I'm not afraid of deadlines, because I agree to a deadline, I shift it up, and I manage it in a way that serves me, and then gives me the time where I can, outside of any pressure, go and put my best on the table and present what I have to present, you know. So there are things that you can do, and this is what I'm talking about. An asset-based approach is where you have control over the things that you have control over, and using those as best as you can to achieve what you need to achieve, you know?
Powerful.
And it's that orientation that needs to come to the fore and be developed, because I think that's part of the difficulties young people have, and a lot of us as well, that leads us into things that causes all sorts of stress in our lives that shouldn't be.
Okay. Mr. Smith, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Have provided us with nuggets of wisdom which can go on and on, but our viewers will really appreciate it, and our beneficiaries. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Right. So we've just spoken to Mr. Smith with regards to our 3 crucial topics for this episode, which is stress management, time management, as well as the importance of celebrating and commemorating Youth Day. And right now, we just want to hear from the community residents of Mamelodi. So why is it important for young people to celebrate Youth Day or commemorate Youth Day?
Because it bohlokwa mo bathong or tshwanetse re tsebe gore se re tsebe bohlokwa ba Youth Day gore ke eng. Tshwanetse re kerekeng rapele modimo gore o re thušitše go sane ya apartheid soko ba re hlakišiwa re hlaka ra bona gore ende re lwele bophelo ba rena le rena re kgone go phela gabotse re phele free.
Because youth is something that came from now on because on last dilo mo kgale in this thing dilo tsa di-youth because batho ne ba suffer-a batho ba batsho ne ba suffer-a ba sena dilo tsa di-youth makgwa ne ba irela dilo tse ba di nyakang mo bophelong so batho ba bantsho ne ba sa be le enough dilo tse ne ba di nyakang mo bophelong so that is why no so tlile dilo tse tsa youth Mandela ba di lwetse batho ba bantši ba lwetse youth gore di kgone go iragala no.
You they like you celebrate it by enjoying your past self in order hore you kgone itse hore ho iragalang ka wena. It's all about youth. Young people celebrate how you grow up, how you grew up. If you grew up bad, then you celebrate that you grew up bad. If you grew up good, you celebrate that you grew up good. But the main lesson is that we all should celebrate Youth Day because it's a reminder of us how we grew up and stuff. That's how I define how I celebrate Youth Day.
Oh, Youth Month ka Neil Mawan. I was at school yesterday because our teacher what we did because as a youth, tshwanetse re be sekolong, we focus on our studies as always so that we can have a beautiful future and change our home situation because our background I so in the future we want to change everything that they can help our parents in many things because from komathomong re salva banyana ba re thusitse le bona until now so I think we should pay back everything.
And then how do you as a young person celebrate Youth Day?
because tshwanetse gore re tsebe gore tšatši le la kgone le bohlokwa tshwane re se re le celebrate tshwane re ye dikerekeng ba bangwe ba ye kae-kae ba bangwe ba ye kerekeng ba ye di-partying gore tšatši le kgone le be monate.
All right. It's very important so that they can know where they came from. It's very important. So mara ba khone itse gore ba tlha kae, how did they grow up? Like it's all about you. It's young people. Yeah.
Nna ke nna ka mo gae ke na le batswadi le bana ba go gae ra celebrate nako tse dingwe ra tsamaya ra go kerekeng re celebrate le bana ba bangwe ra opela like re le choir re no ira choir ra opela ra celebrate letsatsi le.
What's the most important or biggest lesson that the youth can learn today?
Go hlompha batho ba bagolo, go hlompha batho ba bagolo gore ke ba bagolo ke bona ba re lwetseng nte bophelo bola maburu ba re hlakiša ba re bolele Afrikaans and Afrikaans a re kgone ba re gapeletša gore re bolele Afrikaans sone ba re ba hlompe ka gore ba re lwetse bophelo kwa mathomong go le ba re hlakiša ba re tia ba ria mehlolo moka ba gana re bolela language ya rena ba re bolele South African se nnoši fela ba re English se ka ba ra e bolela
Kore as a youth tshwanetse re thusane because nowadays re shebellana fatshe fela a re thusane not at all.
All right, and then how would you define stress?
O tshwanetse ba lena dilo tse ntši because ka gobane kgale dilo tse tsa youth ne di steng so dilo tsa no like motho mongwe le mongwe o kgona go tsena sekolo mahala dilo tsa di-youth ba di celebrate pila kgale ne di steng dilo tse tsa mahala no di change dilo ke dilo tsa baswa no ke tsa di-youth le tsena sekolo mahala kgale ne ba sa di tsene sekolo no nyaka ya di-school fees tsona tse.
Okay. They should learn to be themselves. You see, don't try to be somebody else that you can't afford that lifestyle of make a double life. Nah, be yourself. Once you be yourself, you'll accept yourself, then you'll be cool with yourself. That's my advice.
So we've just covered our three crucial topics for this episode. The first one being what is stress? How do you manage stress effectively? and the importance of managing stress. We also looked at time management. What exactly is time management, and how do you effectively implement time management strategies in your personal and professional life? And then we also looked at the importance of commemorating Youth Day. And last but not least, we looked at some of the roles that the youth of South Africa play in shaping the socio-economic landscape of our country. Now we challenge you as our viewers to tell us more about your Youth Day or Youth Month experience. How do you celebrate it? How do you commemorate it? And what are some of the biggest and most important lessons that you've learned from commemorating Youth Day or Youth Month? Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification button so that you know when we release more content. Thank you.